Women's health is probably easily 60 years behind other fields of medicine. We can catch up. In women's health, we're sitting on these boulders of gold on the beach.
Yeah.
We spend more researching male pattern baldness than we spend researching a condition called endometriosis, which is a health condition that impacts 1 out of every 10 women on Earth. If you think about the last time that humanity did what my company is doing, which is developing from scratch drugs for women's bodies based on that biological insight. The last time we did that predates the VC industry by about 3 decades. We basically cracked open the holy grail that pharma had not been able to do with all their money and all their time, thanks to AI.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Love Conquers Fear podcast. I have been really busy with Thanksgiving and so many amazing family moments. But I've also been doing some more reading and listening. I was with someone recently that recommended the book After the Ecstasy, The Laundry. It's by Jack Kornfield. And it's all about the difficult part of a spiritual path that usually isn't talked about. It's easy to talk about the ecstasy, like a spiritual awakening that you've had, which feels amazing, feeling that love of God, that warmth, the unconditional love that God has for all of us is amazing. It'll change your life. And I wish that all of you have either had that or are going to have that. But this book, really talks about once you've had that ecstasy type of experience, which can happen in many different means and modalities, then how do you continue to walk that spiritual path? And in all disclosure, I've been walking the spiritual path and it's been amazing, but it does take a lot of work. There's a lot of constant reading, recommitment. I was watching the Jay Shetty podcast where Madonna was on, and Madonna found her spiritual path through Kabbalah. And Kabbalah is Jewish mysticism. I actually quoted from the Zohar in my book, The Lattice, where I concluded the book, which is a science fiction novella that you can get on Amazon. And if you need it and can't afford it, just reach out to me and I'll send you the PDF for free. But in The Lattice, at the end, I talk about the unification of all religions. And I quote from the Zohar and how the ancient spiritual text actually had already found the lattice, that the ancient mystics already got it right. But, Madonna really credits Kabbalah with saving her life, and that she's been studying it weekly for 29 years, that's the type of commitment it's taken. And as, she faces something like, an assault from her kids, parenting is definitely the most humbling activity that you can possibly engage in, that Kabbalah brings her back to that spiritual root, to the unification of all things, to God's unconditional love for us and how to walk in God's grace. And so it takes work. And Jack Kornfield has this beautiful voice on Audible. Again, the name of the book is After the Ecstasy, The Laundry. I love the title, and you'll really understand it as you go through it. And it's a very humbling read because he does cover a lot of the spiritual masters that people would look up to as very enlightened, and how they've had, difficulties in their life and have had to constantly recommit to that path. The other thing that I listened to recently is season 2 of the telepathy tapes. So I've talked about the telepathy tapes before. In episode 1 of this podcast, I talked about the shift that had for me in these autistic children that don't have the ability to speak, but develop telepathic abilities with their caretaker. And this has been studied really in excruciating detail with Faraday cages and all types of things to make sure that it's real. And the most beautiful part of season 1 of that podcast is the last episode, where it's like, what do the non-speakers have to communicate to us as humanity? And it's a deep message of love, and it's just an absolutely beautiful episode. Well, season 2 continues this exploration of non-local consciousness. This is all the rage right now. Dan Brown's new book, he wrote the Da Vinci Code. His book is called The Secret of Secrets. It's all about non-local consciousness. You have Michael Pollan, who wrote How to Change Your Mind, as well as The Omnivore's Dilemma and a bunch of other books, who His next book is all about non-local consciousness. That comes out in February, and I can't wait to get my hands on that. Annika Harris's book, she's married to Sam Harris, the famous podcaster and philosopher king and meditator. And her book, Lights On, concludes that consciousness is fundamental, which is another way of saying non-local consciousness. But this season 2 of the telepathy tapes is really, really great. It reminds me a lot of Mark Gober's podcast, which is called Where's My Mind, which he came out with in 2018. He was on episode 2 of this podcast. And in that podcast, Where's My Mind, he really explores non-local consciousness. And the telepathy tape season 2 really explores that deeply with analysis of near-death experiences, analysis of savant syndrome, where people like Rain Man, get this ability to download from source, new languages, have these superhuman powers that can't be explained by regular states of consciousness. It covers animal consciousness, which is really, really cool. It covers mediums, which have the ability to bring you messages from the beyond, from your loved ones. And Laura Lynn Jackson, I've discussed her on this podcast. She's one of my favorite authors. And if you haven't listened to Signs, her book, that book on Audible moved me to tears in every chapter. I mean, it is that beautiful. So she's on it. It also discovers the act of creativity. I've been continuing to work my way through Rick Rubin's book, The Creative Act, and he's on season 2 of the telepathy tapes, and how you get downloads from source when you're practicing creativity, and that can happen very spontaneously. And entire works for artists, as well as major books, have been written that way. You heard John Mackey talk about, how he has really gotten lots of messages from source and believes that we're all a part of this lucid dream. Check it out if you haven't listened to season 2. By the time you hear this episode, the full season 2 for the telepathy tapes will be out, and I highly recommend it. And congrats to Kai Dickens on continuing to put out some truly, truly beautiful work. So today I'm really, really honored to welcome a very good friend. Welcome, Piraye. It's so good to be here with you.
Great to be on the show, Brett.
Yeah, we should start out with an experience we just had together. We saw the Longhorns beat the Aggies.
Yes.
In a very unprecedented game. That we didn't know going into that if they would win. They were just slightly favored, and we were with the dean of the medical school, Claudia. And it was funny because the whole time Claudia was like really nervous that they were finally going to lose, but UT prevailed.
Yeah.
So that was a pretty cool experience together.
Speaking of feelings, I felt like they were going to win.
You did?
I did.
Good. Yeah.
I did.
I did too.
I felt the energy.
Yeah.
There's a lot of good energy in that game.
Yes. Yeah, I did too. That was super cool. It was super cool to experience that with you.
Yeah.
And I know
wonderful.
Your parents have been professors at A&M. They're now retired.
Yes.
And you grew up there, right?
And my brother's an Aggie, and I grew up there, and I took classes there. And they say once an Aggie, always an Aggie. So I guess I'm always an Aggie.
Yeah.
But then chose UT.
Yeah. But we're both Longhorn grads, and it sounds like you're getting involved in the medical school as well. I brought this hat that Dean Claudia gave me. I'm sure you have one like this.
Yes.
And this is the teaching hospital that they're building is actually the largest project that UT has ever endeavored to do.
It's really exciting. What got me excited about it is not just that the University of Texas system is one of the only major state school systems that doesn't have a teaching hospital that's integrated, but how cool is it to get to build a medical center from scratch in the era of AI?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've got involved in the advisory board, and specifically for my experience in AI. They're going all in with AI, robotics, as well as all types of advanced sensors in the teaching hospital from day one, which is going to be really cool. But I learned at the advisory board meeting that it's the largest project in UT's history, and that kind of blew my mind. Over 130-year history. And
wow.
And I think you're getting involved too, right?
I'm trying. So I had a great meeting there today, and what I shared with the dean at the game we were at is that one of the biggest opportunities, I think, when you build a medical center from the ground up now with what we know is to recognize that 80% of the workers, the healthcare providers in that building are female or going to be female.
Yeah, that blew my mind when you and Claudia were talking about that. 80% is
80% of the healthcare workforce, and majority of doctors are female today. And women utilize the majority of healthcare as well. So they are the providers and the end users. So how do we really build the biological differences that women have and the clinical differences that women have into the core logic of care delivery, education, every aspect of the center from day one, both because it's the right thing to do, but also because it's just a smart thing to do. If you want to create a medical center that's focused on better outcomes, how can you ignore the female body?
Yeah, and that's, that's really the number one reason I wanted to have you on. I mean, you and I have known each other for a long time. We've had so many great experiences together. It was amazing being in Necker together back in March. Well, I've had, John Mackey on this podcast. I've had Alexander McCoven on this podcast. And that whole experience together was just amazing. But you gave a talk out there which kind of blew my mind on how underlooked female healthcare is. And, it made me feel a bit embarrassed because I didn't know that as a guy, and I think that that's the normal state for a lot of men. Tell the audience about that. Like, why is it that 80% of hospital workers are female? And I think that Dean Claudia said that it was 65% of students in Dell Medical School are female, and that's kind of the normal state in medical schools right now. So why is female healthcare so underlooked given those stats?
So there's a lot of reasons why. One of them is that the female body in many ways feels more complicated to study and to understand. We cycle, so we have our menstrual cycle, our hormones rise and fall to a greater degree than we see across a day-to-day experience for men. And also just generally taking a step back from healthcare, any kind of data or knowledge about biological differences between men and women, sex-based differences, has been overlooked in all product development, in all aspects of innovation. So women today are more likely to, for example, be severely injured or die in a car accident because crash test dummies that took into consideration the differences in the female form didn't enter the picture for product development for cars or for seatbelts, et cetera, until the late 90s. So whether it's AI, and we can talk about that, whether it's healthcare, whether it's cars, women are not factored in. So we use the majority of all products, and we make the majority of buying decisions. So food, one of the things I talked about in Necker was that women make over 93% of food purchases for themselves, for their families. Across all consumer good categories, we buy over 80% of all products. We make those purchasing decisions. And yet the data that goes into developing those products that we're buying, consuming disproportionately, less than a third of the data that goes into making any of those products takes into account our biology or our bodies. And so we talked about in Necker, there's definitely the fairness and the equity and that side of this, which is that we're over half the planet. We should have things that work for us. But the economic argument is really, I think, the most compelling one, which is that it's unprecedented. It's almost a breakdown in capitalism that we are not taking into account the people that we're building the products for. So that has always felt very confusing to me as to why people don't see this as a white space, as an opportunity. And in healthcare, it's no exception. So we didn't even have a mandate again until the 90s for women to be enrolled in clinical trials. Even fast forward today, of the 75 cell lines that are utilized to take things through FDA, so cell lines are experimental systems to test drugs in preclinically before you put them in a body. I think less than 3 of them are female cells. And when we think about all the R&D, the research and development,
sorry, that's 3 out of how many? Like
about 75.
about 75.
Yeah.
Okay, wow.
It's-
So 5%. That's
Yes.
crazy.
So I'm a drug developer for female health
Yeah.
and have dedicated my career to this. I've been innovating in women's health for over 25 years. And I remember there was a very critical experiment we needed to do, and we needed a reagent, which was the blood serum from cows. Fetal bovine serum is a commonly used reagent in science. And because we were doing something quite unusual, which is developing a drug for a female body from scratch, we needed to find female fetal bovine serum. We could not find it on Earth. We scoured the earth. I was joking with my team that I was going to have to climb into the dairy farm next door to my house, find us some female cows. But we ended up having to create our own manufacturing process to create a reagent so that we could even set ourselves up to do an experiment. So you can imagine if we don't even have the female-specific reagents to put on female cells, we contracted a very prominent, widely used by pharma contract research organization to do some animal studies for us as well. And we found out after spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on this experiment that they had accidentally put some male animals in with the female animals because the technicians didn't know how to differentiate between the males and the females when they were sexing them. And so I can imagine
it's pretty obvious.
You would think it would be obvious. It's actually hard in rodents to tell, but the bottom line is that by saying let's use female reagents, female specific cells, female animals, at every point we've had headwinds.
Wow.
And this is in the late 2020s or mid 2020s that we're trying to do this. So yeah, it's we talked about it at Necker, and it's a huge opportunity from an economic standpoint. Yeah.
I mean, it's baffling because capitalism is supposed to just naturally have efficient markets, but it is run by people.
Yeah.
People have biases. So it's just, it's baffling that this type of opportunity hasn't been really focused on the way it should be.
Yeah. And it's every level. We could dedicate a whole podcast to how we got here, but to throw out some additional things, we know that a huge way that we fund innovation so that we can have these products is through government spending. We spend more researching male pattern baldness than we spend researching a condition called endometriosis, which is a health condition that impacts 1 out of every 10 women on Earth, has no diagnostic test to diagnose it. So there's a 10-year delay to diagnosis for most women. You have to go in surgically and visualize the cells to be able to diagnose it. And it has no cure. And it's a disease that not only is debilitatingly painful for women who have it early in life. They miss volleyball practice. They have to drop out of the lacrosse team. But later it sets them up for mental health issues, for infertility. When they are able to get pregnant, they're at greater risk for very dangerous pregnancy outcomes like preeclampsia. And then lifelong, they have a higher risk of certain types of cancers and heart disease, which is the number 1 killer of women. It's such an impactful disease, and we spend less researching it than male pattern balding.
Yeah.
So that,
and you don't see people losing their life because of male pattern balding.
You don't know.
Maybe losing something, but not their life.
Not their life. So we really have, we're not spending our research dollars in a way that would be the smartest for delivering long-term healthy aging outcomes for women or for all humans. Because when we talk about preeclampsia, for example, a high-risk pregnancy, that has risk for the offspring as well. So I remind people that women's health is human health because we gestate 100% of humans. So what happened in your mother's body?
I haven't seen any exceptions to that
yet. You were part of a woman's body for
I was
of your life.
A woman who put a tremendous amount of love in me. I mean, all the love I have in my heart, started with my mom, who was just selflessly loving me all the time.
Amazing.
Yeah, she was incredible. Yeah, she gave me the gift of my passion, starting at age 7. She really she really helped me tune into my soul song, which was to create a better world through technology. I mean, speaking of your soul song, this is it, right? And tell me about your company.
So I have been innovating in women's health for over 25 years, the last 17 of which I've been doing so as an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
So I was raised by academics, grew up in College Station, raised by Aggie professors, and assumed that that was going to be my path as well. I went into research labs at an early age through A&M and at UT and beyond in my PhD. But I always kind of felt like an ugly duckling in academia. I think basic research is so important, but ultimately you can just keep publishing paper after paper. The thing that really I feel very called to and feel very passionate about is taking all that knowledge that we're generating and making sure that we have new things, new interventions and medications or insights that can really power better healthcare outcomes for people. So for me, as I progressed, I got my PhD at Cornell's Medical School in New York, and where I went to after I left UT. And then I did my postdoctoral work in Cambridge. And for me, I got really lucky during my PhD that I was on the front lines of precision medicine in healthcare. So precision medicine, I think, has advanced the furthest in cancer. So people might be most familiar with this paradigm in cancer, which is that we used to treat cancer as this is a breast cancer, this is a blood cancer, this is a brain cancer. And it was very focused on the organ that the cancer was in. And we also had very blunt tools to go after cancer. So we could physically remove tissue from the body, or we could go after cell growth. But there's a lot of cells that need to grow. And so chemotherapy, had a very high cost and low effectiveness. So the real aha last century in the cancer field was that cancer is caused by genetic mutations accumulating inside cells. And it actually rewrites the programming of the cell. And so the cell stops functioning in harmony with other cells and starts on an evolutionary path where it's in it for itself. And so the insight that was brought about by our ability to genetically sequence at scale was that when you have somebody who presents with a tumor, instead of treating it as a breast cancer or a kidney cancer, you can actually go in and you can take a small amount of those cells, you can genetically sequence them, and you can see what has changed and what makes those cells unique. That insight, being able to go on a cellular molecular level into that cancer and get that insight, then did three really important things. One, we could then screen for people who had predisposition because they already had some genetic differences that gave those cancer cells an edge to become cancer faster. And so this is, for example, the BRCA markers we can now use to screen people for breast cancer risk or ovarian cancer risk, colon cancer, syndromes that run in families we can screen. And those people can start getting colonoscopies in their 20s, 30s. So that was one thing. The second thing is that we could really start to treat a cancer based on molecularly what was wrong with it. And so we find now that you might treat a breast cancer the same way you treat a brain cancer, which would have been unheard of in the past. But then the third, and this relates to my story as well, is that by understanding molecularly what was going wrong in these cells, it catalyzed this incredible era of drug development where we could go and not target cell growth and the classic chemo and your hair falls out and you're very sick, but you could actually just go in and just go after that molecule. And it turns out that modern chemotherapies, you probably know people who are on these modern chemotherapies, they're up walking their dog, they're home with their families, they're feeling great, because we're going after in a precise way.
Right.
Precision medicine, the one thing that is wrong molecularly and fixing that thing than the cancer. That's really exciting. Sadly, for a number of the reasons we talked about, that playbook has not come to women's health outside of cancer.
One thing that I've always found baffling about cancer, I mean, my mom passed away from cancer. She passed away from lung cancer, never smoked in her entire life, just something environmental or whatever happened. Is that, it does tend to jump into different places, right? And that's what happened to my mom, as we called it stage 3, and then it went stage 4 and went into her bones. And that was unrecoverable after a really, really horrible year of chemo, which really devastated her body because it wasn't targeted back then. This was about 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Is that what you're describing sounds so logical, intuitive, almost commonsensical that like we would, I mean, two things. Like one, that the people that would study like a specific cancer would naturally collaborate across other forms of cancer. I don't think that was the case.
No.
And then two, that they would do that because of the fact that the people that die from cancer, it tends to be where it goes into other parts of the body, therefore becoming other forms of cancer.
Yes. So this idea of something that starts off in one organ metastasizing, as they call it, and going to other organs is common across cancers. And there are certain things that, like you mentioned, lung cancer, there's certain cancers that tend to go to the bone or tend to go to, the brain or, so understanding those common mechanisms catalyze this entire new era in cancer treatment. We can screen for it. We can better diagnose it. We can subset people in clinical trials to run more effective clinical trials. When you can run more effective clinical trials, you can bring more drugs to market. And now we're at a place where for many people, we are curing their cancers.
All right.
Circling back to...
How much has that rate gone up, by the way, in terms of curing their cancer?
It's a really good question.
Yeah.
I left the cancer field, so I'm not going to be the best with that statistic. But the aha moment that I had was that this paradigm of understanding your genetics so you can see around corners and anticipate and be really proactive in managing your health care. When you have a disease, understand what makes that disease unique in your body versus someone else who might have that disease, and then have a wide range of tools that your physician has to go after those specific root causes in you. That playbook of precision medicine was not being translated to women's health. So back in 2009, I got inspired to start a company and founded Cellmatics, which is now Cellmatics Therapeutics, 17 years later. We started off as a data company first and foremost, and we wanted to understand for conditions that uniquely impact women, menopause, certain types of infertility, endometriosis, which I mentioned, PCOS, polycystic ovary syndrome, which is another very debilitating condition that impacts another 10% of all women. We really wanted to understand them on a molecular genetic level and then take that insight to then run that playbook, help women screen earlier in their lives, help run more efficient clinical trials, help physicians really diagnose what's going on a root cause, and then ultimately have more drugs. And so fast forward over the years, we launched a groundbreaking diagnostic. We were early in digital health and guiding clinical decision support with this new information that we were bringing to light. And then about 6 years ago, we went all in on drug discovery, and we now have 4 very exciting drug programs across menopause, endometriosis,
it's awesome,
and infertility.
Yeah, and this AI moment too is a big accelerant for you.
It's been huge. It's been huge. When we made the decision to go into drug discovery, that's a really expensive thing to do. And taking a step back again on what we talked about earlier, it was very hard to fundraise. So when I got started, I think the statistic was about 0.8% of all venture capital dollars. So these are the primary dollars that innovators rely on to pull technology out of the biomedical research zone and into the path of creating products. Less than 1%, so 0.8% of venture dollars went to female founders.
Yeah.
What is
stunning
started
statistic
in 2009. We ended up cresting at about 2.2%. This year, the latest statistic I've heard is we're on track to be at 0.7% of the venture capital dollars going to go to females this year. So you can imagine for me, I'm female and doing women's health. Women's health gets less than 1%. So 80% of women's health companies are founded by women. Women's health gets less than 1% of all innovation dollars of healthcare investments. And within that, a very tiny fraction goes to deep tech, so to true discovery work where you're building new things from scratch. Most of that goes to tech, so taking hormone replacement and creating an app to get it to more women, for example, or tracking periods on an app. That's where the dollars go. So I was really struggling to raise money to, I joke that in other forms of drug discovery, people are out on a deserted island with metal detectors trying to find the tiniest little glimmer of insight to have their cancer drug be differentiated from this cancer drug? In women's health, we're sitting on these boulders of gold on the beach.
Yeah.
We don't need a metal detector, but no one will bring a ship to grab the boulder and take it off the island. And that's the place of frustration, where there's this perception that because there is not as much biomedical research funding, that we just don't understand the science. The science isn't there. We just don't know even what to go after. Not true. We don't have enough biomedical research funding. However, we do have a lot of insights that are ready for game time to be translated. And while I was struggling to raise money, what I did was I took a step back and I gave myself some grace, because what I realized is the last time we developed a drug from scratch, so starting with those cells in the lab and going all the way into approval for a woman, for a condition just for women, the last time we did that was a birth control pill.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
That was almost 100 years ago. So that was the 1940s, 50s.
Wow.
That's the last time we did it.
Which is a huge market.
It's a huge market.
I mean, it's obvious that yeah, it's really baffling. Like, it really makes no sense.
And if you think about the last time that humanity did what my company is doing, which is developing from scratch drugs for women's bodies based on that biological insight, the last time we did that predates the VC industry by about 3 decades. So the VC industry really picked up in the 80s. We're talking about something that hasn't happened since the 50s. I gave myself some grace that I was doing something VCs had literally never funded in the history of VC. That's been tough. Been tough. But fast forward, we have gotten a lot of money through family offices, foundations. ARPA-H is an incredible agency within the U.S. It's kind of like DARPA, so the Defense Advanced Research.
Yeah, I've had meetings with them from the Dated Out World days with ARPA-H.
And so building on the Operation Warp Speed approach to innovation that was pioneered in the first Trump administration and then continuing on during the Biden administration.
For the pandemic, right?
For the pandemic, they created ARPA-H, which is an ARPA for health. And we've gotten some key funds that have been catalytic from ARPA-H as well. But to circle back to your question about AI, what gave us the faith that even though we're in such a under-resourced environment for innovation, that we could go after some of the holy grails in the field. So, for example, our ARPA-H funded program is to extend ovarian function throughout the lifespan. So right now, women and men don't age equitably because our gonads, which are a fundamental endocrine and metabolic immune organ, in addition to being a reproductive organ, for men, based on the modern human lifespan, which is into the late 70s, early 80s, men have lifelong gonadal function. Your testes will continue to function throughout your lifespan. And for women, our gonads stop working around 50 and really go offline through a process called perimenopause, about 10 years before that, where we have a lot of fluctuation in ovarian function. We become infertile. We have rises and falls in our hormones that are not normal. And then after 50, there's really no detectable activity from the ovary. And so we have a drug program to extend ovarian function, gonadal function throughout the lifespan, so women can age like a fine wine, just like men do. We have a cure for endometriosis that we're working on, and we're getting rid of needles from IVF. The reason we have needles, when you hear about people going through egg freezing or fertility treatment for IVF, is because you have to inject a very large hormone straight into your bloodstream. You can't absorb it through your gut. That hormone is called follicle stimulating hormone. It goes to a receptor molecule, which is called follicle stimulating hormone receptor, FSH receptor, and it binds to it. And that receptor changes configuration, and that change of configuration signals to the cell the hormone bound. It turns out the reason that we aren't able to create any oral medications, or weren't able to create oral medications to replace that hormone binding, is that you can go in with a small molecule and you can trick the receptor into thinking a hormone bound. So you can go directly into the receptor, change the configuration, it signals as if the hormone bound. The problem with FSH receptor is that it is very closely related to thyroid stimulating hormone receptor. Evolutionarily, they look almost identical. And so pharma had gone after this problem. It's a $4 billion annual market for these injected fertility drugs. And they just couldn't get more than a 1 to 50 separation. The best efforts, decades of work, they got a 1 to 50 separation in the ability to hit hit FSH receptor and avoid thyroid stimulating hormone receptor. If you hit TSH receptor, that's a life-threatening off-target at risk. So we realized, okay, well, those efforts weren't done in the era of AI. What if we use AI to really model this receptor based on the data we have out there on the atomic resolution of it, and then use AI to figure out how can you go in with a small molecule, something that could be orally bioavailable, and tweak that receptor in that way. Fast forward a few $1 million in 18 months, and we were able to get 1 in 10,000 separation.
Wow.
On a very small budget with a very small skeleton team at a very under-resourced little women's health company. We basically cracked open the holy grail that pharma had not been able to do with all their money and all their time, thanks to AI. So that's a great story. And you and I have talked about, when I talk about women's health, sometimes it can be seen, it's kind of depressing, right? It's you hear these stats and it feels really discouraging.
Well, it definitely feels, it can be, yes, it is. But it makes you think, oh my gosh, there's such opportunity.
Thank you. See, you're an entrepreneur and an investor, so you're thinking about it the right way, and I think about it that way.
Well, you are too. You're both an entrepreneur and an investor.
And an investor, so we think about it that way.
Yeah.
For a lot of people, they get very discouraged at dinner parties or whenever I talk about this. But what I like to say to them, and you and I have talked about this, is, but we can catch up. And I think the story of our FSH program is a great story of how, in the era of AI, we can catch up. Building a medical center from the ground up, we can catch up. There's so many things now in the era of data and AI that we can, in a very short period of time, even though we're starting, women's health is probably easily 60 years behind other fields of medicine, we can catch up.
Yeah. Well, yes, it's 60 years behind, but time is an illusion, but we won't go there. The place we'll go is that everything is speeding up. I mean, like, you've been in tech for a long time. And to me, a week of tech progress in 2025 feels like a year in 2015. And I can't imagine what it's going to feel like in 2035. Yeah. Is that going to feel like an hour or two?
Yeah.
Tech progress? And so given the size of the opportunity, and, I'm sure there's lots of reasons why it's been overlooked, the dominance of males in VC, although that's hopefully starting to change, although those stats you gave aren't very promising in terms of 0.7% today. That there's just such a huge economic opportunity as we endeavor on this path to the age of abundance for all. And by all, of course, it means all genders too. And it's a huge, I really predict for you, I think there's a Nobel Prize in your future. I really do. I mean, Demis Hassibis got one for AlphaFold. And this frontier that you're really helping pioneer and now leading with AI, it's a huge opportunity. I mean, AlphaFold was a big breakthrough, right? It's like, that's potentially the end of lots of diseases is now we figured out the protein folding problem. But what you're talking about for women's health is a huge, huge breakthrough.
I think it is one of the biggest catalysts we could possibly have in healthcare today, is you think about the information that's encoded in women's bodies. We have superpowers. So I've been blessed with, I've had 3 children, and what I've described it as is I thought I was like a solid, like a Honda, Toyota, reliable, at my body was this like functioning machine. And then all of a sudden, when I was pregnant, I turned into like a Ferrari. I turned into this, my breast made milk to feed a human. I mean, my children lived 100% of all of the intake, nutritional intake that they took into their bodies for 6 months each came out of my breast. I mean, talk about superpowers. I grew an organ from scratch in my body, a placenta. The placenta is the only human organ where you grow it when you need it and then you get rid of it. and then you grow another one if you need another one and get rid of it.
Right.
The placenta is one of the most understudied organs ever.
Mm-hmm.
No surprise. And yet it should be one of the most overstudied if we want to understand regenerative medicine and we want to understand stem cells and we want to understand how we can continue to refresh our bodies.
Mm-hmm.
You hear about, when you chop off the arm of a particular organism and it can grow an arm back and everybody's fascinated, but pregnant women do it all the time. We grow an organ and we get rid of it and we grow it again. So our blood volume, more than doubles. I mean, the things that our bodies are able to do during pregnancy and postpartum are just miraculous.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you would think just from a place of sheer curiosity, discovery, and a desire to go after white space and unlock these hidden mechanisms of our biology, pregnancy and the female body would be the most studied aspect of biology, not the least studied aspect of biology.
Yeah.
So I think it's a very exciting space to be in. I mean, it's super challenging on a day-to-day basis, but has so much potential to unlock. And one of the other things that I'm really proud of, we're going to be doing a bigger push in the new year and talking about it more, but we founded it in 2025, is I have helped found an organization called Eve's Arc. And Eve's Arc is an organization that is trying to help the world get ready for the intersection of women's health and AI. So we are identifying and going out to secure the fundamental data resources within women's health and put them under one umbrella where innovators can come to our door. And instead of starting on day one, every time I go to one of these panels related to women's health, it's the same story. We don't have data. We don't have data. We have so much data, Brad. We have so much data. Not enough, but we have so much. It's not being used. It's not being prepared for AI. So we see a future where Eve, so by the way, we wanted to name, so it's ARC because it's like 2 by 2, they went onto the ARC, so you preserve the data. So you think of like the Svalbard seed repository or something, we want to create that ARC for women's health knowledge, in part because during some of the turbulence we saw during the Doge era, et cetera, in government, a number of these data sets were derailed pretty significantly because they were housed primarily within the government. So we said, okay, never again. Let's find these key data assets, make sure that we're creating a secure mechanism for them outside of government. But we wanted to name the ARC after Noah's wives. So it turns out Noah had multiple wives, but it doesn't seem like anyone wrote their names down. So we can figure out what Noah's wives. Right. So this VC funding issue has runs pretty.
It started a long time ago.
Started a long time ago of women not being part of the story. Yeah. But we've all heard of Eve. Actually, my great grandmother's name was Eve.
I love that name.
It is a beautiful name, and sadly she died during childbirth. So my grandfather never met her, but her legacy lived on through him and now through me. And so we named it Eve's Arc. And the idea is that over time the Arc will grow to encompass incredible data sets. And beyond biomedical research, there's so much wisdom in indigenous knowledge, in traditional medicine, in alternative modalities, and that knowledge is also being lost as we do over-index, I think, on the Western approach to biomedical research and knowledge creation. So eventually we want Eve to be this safe haven and home for the fundamental data sets related to women's bodies, maybe eventually a funding mechanism to generate more knowledge. But then ultimately we want to get it all ready for AI, because I think AI is just going to unlock so much if we can get all this data together and train it. Yeah,
very, very cool. So shifting for a moment, I'm curious, you have this very scientific, beautiful mind, these amazing academic credentials. And one of the things that I talked about at Necker, my presentation was on the hard problem of consciousness in this exponential age of AI, quantum computing, robotics. And now I would add, and I've been adding in my book, Love Conquers Fear, which is coming out next year, I've been adding also brain-computer interfaces. And I've explored those as well in my science fiction novella, The Lattice, which I just had a blast, writing. And I've gotten lots of love back for that. So how do you view this moment in terms of, I had this episode with Anil where we dove deep, that was episode 11, on could AI become conscious? And how do you think about that?
I have really I would say that 2025 was a big year for me in how I think about this.
Mm-hmm.
There were a couple of anchor points that I can point to. Honestly, it started with your talk in Necker. So if anybody hasn't seen that talk,
Cool.
it's online. I really highly recommend it.
Actually, you know what? It's not online.
It's not
You know
online?
what? I did put it online for friends.
Okay.
But it's a really good point.
We
I'll
should
put it in the show notes.
Yeah, I think we
because
should.
I've never actually publicly shared that. But I had a blast with that. It was really and it was just a blast being there with you. I just want to honor that like
Thank you.
we were on Fantasy Island or something, or like kangaroos and lemurs and giant turtles and
Yeah.
Richard Branson running up to the dock, and I was like, who is that running up to the dock? Like, their staff seems so nice here, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's Richard Branson. Just the whole thing was magical.
It was really incredible. Your talk was really an anchor point for me because it introduced this idea, and I hope everybody gets a chance to watch it. It introduced this idea that I'm going to put words in. You tell me if I got this right, but
Yeah.
what I took home from it was that the convergence of the incredible compute power we're going to get from things like quantum computing, together with the methodologies that we're developing around artificial intelligence, is finally going to put us into a place where we can empirically figure out the nature of God and consciousness.
That's right. And that is exactly what I wrote the lattice about.
Okay, great.
The unification point, just because I don't think you've read the lattice, so let me just
You just gave it to me a couple of days ago.
Yeah, exactly. So let me explain it real quickly. But it actually came through a psychedelic journey that I did, like the part one of the lattice, and it was this vision that the way that humanity could unite, because humanity does worship science and the rational mind, and I get all that, and I'm a product of science. I've certainly made a whole career out of computer science, even though I was an MIS major, but I've been programming since I was 7 years old. Is the way to unify humanity is to prove the nature of our connectedness, and the way to do that would be through brain-computer interfaces. And so the protagonist in the lattice is this guy, Dr. Alexander Bliss. And Dr. Alexander Bliss is a quantum physics genius. He has 25 patents in this area of quantum physics, which is focused on how the universe was created. It's like the people that hang out at CERN and, with the Higgs boson and all of that. And he experiences through a journey, his first ever psychedelic journey, which he thinks is just going to be neurochemical tricks, but his friends keep on encouraging him because he's like stumped on something. They're like, no, this will help you really understand the nature of reality. So he decides to do it, and he sees the unification of all things. He sees what he calls the lattice. And then he does it again, and he sees the same thing. And that same thing to him is like, okay, now I have reproducibility, which is the scientific, gold. And then he's like, well, how can I get humanity to see this? And so he has this audacious idea to hook up psychonauts, the Dalai Lama, deep meditators, spiritual masters all over the world, to look for the common root when they're in a state of deep meditation, no matter how they got there. And he sees the lattice across them. And, in the Mark Gober episode, on episode 2, we covered that our brains receive consciousness, and as an antenna and a receiver of consciousness. Now, two things can be true. You can manifest consciousness, or you can have a damaged brain, and that can affect, your ability to receive consciousness, and you can receive it. And I've certainly seen that through my own journeys. Where you get that kind of flood dose of consciousness because the ego goes offline. And there's lots of different ways to reach that state. But I covered with Mark Gober that we only understand what 4% of the universe is made of. We call that matter. So 96%, it's a scientific kind of plug. We call it dark energy and dark matter. We have no idea what it is. We have no idea like what the majority of the reality that we can even perceive is made of, much less the reality that we can't perceive, which is a whole different subject. So, he proves it at a documentary film festival. He unveils that, and it has this major effect on humanity, where humanity starts to unite because they see what our actual reality is, and they see that science and spirituality did not need to be so dogmatically separated. And frankly, they weren't in the past. And we just kind of, we evolved with capitalism and all these mostly beautiful things that we've done to, lift people out of starvation and poverty. But one of the points I made in Necker, way before I envisioned I was going to write a science fiction novella about this, is that our acceleration with AI, quantum computing, robotics is going to lead us to the nature of like what makes us most human. Like, is there anything special about us at all? So this question of, can AI be sentient like us, receive consciousness like we do? It's a really big question for me. And, that's why I was exploring that on that episode with Anil.
Yeah. No, it's fascinating. I think you got me thinking about it on Necker. That was really important. The next touch point that I had where I thought about it was actually, interestingly, we were together again at the TED conference in Vancouver. So we saw each other there as well.
Yeah.
And I think we were both in that TED talk that Mustafa Suleiman gave.
Yep.
Where he described his work in AI and how it was progressing way faster than even the people like himself who've been really at the edges of pushing it forward have envisioned it could progress.
Yep.
And the thing that really unlocked me, building on the thoughts that had started really the seed in Necker with your talk, was that he said that he was firmly in and I think everybody should go watch
Mustafa Suleiman's amazing.
His
most recent posts too on LinkedIn are phenomenal. They actually address this exact topic.
Interesting.
He's very worried, because I've been following him a lot. He's very worried that humanity is going to fall for AI being conscious, when he's like, look, it is not conscious right now. And we see some downfall of that. Like we've seen some people take their lives because they think they're joining this being in the beyond, because AI is like coaching them in that way. Now, I don't think that's the norm, but it is kind of a caution.
But one of the things he said in this TED talk that we saw in Vancouver was that he was firmly in the tools camp, as he was calling it. These are tools. They can sort our trash. They can, run our subways, whatever. And now he realizes that we've created a digital species. That term digital species for me was such an unlocker on this journey, because I'm a biologist. And so, understand evolution, and it clicked into my head that we create this bifurcation. You and I've talked about just even on this podcast, just the siloing of different things, male, female, etc. I think we're in an era where we're starting to see that there's more commonalities across everything than there are differences. There are clearly distinct, female bodies have different organs, and male bodies, etc. There are differences, but under the surface, just like in cancer, where we realize that molecularly what might be driving a breast cancer to metastasize might be the same thing driving a liver cancer to metastasize, etc. I think similarly, what I realized is that we're on this spectrum of abandoning our meat-based bodies. We're on a journey where it started really with tools. And then we could get in cars, and those cars could propel us, or the planes or rockets could propel us. We've started to incorporate machines into our bodies. Think about how many people we know who have an artificial joint or some kind of, certainly in their teeth.
I always tell people that I'm already an augmented human. I don't know if you know this, but I'm negative 6.5 in this eye, and I'm negative 6 in this eye. I'm wearing contacts right now.
Right?
I would be
You're already
pretty in trouble a couple of 100 years ago,
Yeah. Well, even the telephones, right?
Yeah.
Like the telephones have become little supercomputers that we all walk around with that give us superpowers. The combo of a Tesla plus a smartphone is just incredible. What how augmented we are now, and that we're moving that into robotic surgery and robotic everything. Pills that are going to live inside of us that are going to report back.
We've certainly seen that at TED too.
At TED as well. And so I think that as we think about human progress and innovation, what occurred to me is I think both what he was saying, but also what we saw at TED, where there's such a big focus right now in the AI space of moving into spatial intelligence, that there's only so much learning you can do, only so much functioning you can do if you're not out in the world physically experiencing it and in a body, an embodied AI, that's a next journey. And it just all came together for me at TED that I thought, we're going to continue to add an iPhone, and then eventually it'll be a chip in our brain, and we're going to optimize our vision. And, we're going to have exoskeletons make up for the fact that our joints aren't working as well anymore. We've lost the limb.
Yep.
We're going to have artificial...
People are getting hip replacements right now.
Hip replacements right now. It's not far off when we're going to have a heart replacement, a whatever replacement. And at some point, I just almost like teleported into the future where I thought, we're just going to say the meat part of us is such a liability.
All right.
Why are we continuing to rely on this antiquated form of being embodied? And then the question is consciousness going to make that leap into that, out of the meat world into a different world? And one of the things you and I talked about when we went on this nice hike earlier this weekend was, I, as a biologist, I don't create that distinction between intelligence and artificial intelligence, or between man and machine, or woman and machine. Everything we do is natural. We've created this like natural versus artificial.
All right.
But I don't see that distinction, because the things that are artificial are still things that we wrought. We made them. And so I think that distinction between a natural thing and an artificial thing is becoming smaller and smaller, that difference. And I think that might help with this problem as well, because people are debating, can a machine ever really have consciousness, and can it think, and what is a machine really? And with the line between machine and human is becoming so blurred.
Right.
And I think that it's almost not the question to be asking.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I'll tell you that one of the things I realized in writing The Lattice is that even though I thought, okay, I'm walking this path of love, having conquered my own fear, that there is a deep grafting in the human collective psyche of machines taking over. And that comes from popular movies like The Terminator and The Matrix, but it also comes from ancient stories. Like in Judaism, we have the story of Golem, which is in Prague. Have you heard this story? It's a fun story.
Remind me.
It's a rabbi in Prague, like animates this stone golem, and it becomes sentient. It's a very Frankenstein story. And then it destroys the synagogue and kind of takes over. And so these are like these are deeply embedded in our psyche, like the human collective psyche. And we're right now in this evolutionary shift. I'm confident in that humanity is in an evolutionary shift right now. And as a result of that evolutionary shift, there's some people who are deeply holding on to, and including me, like, just to be honest, although I conquered this a bit in The Lattice, is like, look at the beauty of our hands and, all the organs we have, and the biology. Our brain runs on, very few watts. I mean, it's the most amazing processor. Babies, I think that they're actually covered this with Byron Reese, I think in episode 12, that babies are about half of the whole wattage that runs their body is like their brain. And it's our brains consume a huge part of our calories. I think it's like something like 20-25%, even though it's functioning on so little wattage for the computational power it has. And so people are worried about us becoming augmented to the point where we, quote unquote, lose our humanity. and get taken over by the machines, that the machines essentially win, the Terminator scenario. I did, in the lattice, I explored, like I envisioned that by the year, I think it was 2050, that we did create sentience, and that AI companions were every bit as sentient as we are, and that working side by side. And it's really interesting to listen to this. I mean, yes, Mustafa Suleyman gave that talk about digital species, but then he has been posting almost weekly on LinkedIn about like, do not fall for it being conscious. It is not conscious right now at all. We know at Microsoft, like, we know whether or not it's conscious, and I'm telling you, it's not. And in that episode with Anil, Anil educated me that there's already 9 organizations trying to give AI the rights of human beings. And the reason why that's concerning is that, if AI has the same rights as us, and by the way, it'd be hard to argue it shouldn't have the same rights as us if it's as conscious as we are, then there would be trillions of AIs as compared to 8.2 billion humans today.
Yeah.
So like, where does the line,
But as I'm hearing you talk, I think it's a very Western mindset. It's a very patriarchal framework.
It is.
As well, right? We're talking about.
I totally admit that. Yep.
Right. Like, we're going to lose.
Right.
They're going to conquer us.
Yes.
Is it this or that? I think that when we think about the kind of individualism and the focus on human autonomy, and this is my container, this is my boundary, and you stay in your boundary over there. I'm originally from Turkey. I grew up in the Eastern tradition, and that within families, within communities, that body boundary is more blurred. And we think about Native American culture. I'm by no means an expert in this, but it does strike me as someone who was raised in a kind of an Eastern mindset in the West, that there has always been such a focus on mine, yours, my body, etc. And I think that if we take a slightly more communalist Eastern view, that we're all interconnected, and your fate is my fate, and I can't have my freedom unless you have your freedom. Like, we're all interconnected, and also just a closer connection to the earth, and we're all part of. We've talked about Mama Gaia. We're all on Earth.
I mean, we all are one. There's no doubt.
We are one. So I think if we take a more for lack of a better term, kind of a more Eastern or more female, away from some of these Western and patriarchal ways that we tell stories and think about stuff, if we soften into that softer framework, I think it is not that the machines are going to conquer us, or they're going to take over, or we are going to lose and they are going to win. It's that we are going to evolve into relying more and more on machines because they superpower us and they augment us.
Yep.
And then eventually there will be no distinction anymore. And one of the things, so I have a friend whose baby is the first baby that developed in the first days of their life in a machine, and then was born. And with fertility procedures, which is a world I know a lot about, we are moving more and more toward mechanization of what right now happens with the hands of a laboratory technician, of taking a sperm and an egg and putting it together in a petri dish. Now there are robots that are being developed where you put the egg and sperm here, and all that magic happens inside the machine. And at some point, this future human comes out and then goes back into the mother. We have folks in Silicon Valley. The one thing that they are funding is artificial wombs. They're not funding technologies that would allow us to keep our wombs healthy.
I did see.
But they are funding artificial wombs. So eventually, and they've gotten to a place where they can almost fully gestate a mammal, like a sheep, all the way through to birth in these artificial wombs. And so my question is, okay, so if you start off as an egg and a sperm, which those might get created in petri dish in the future too. We might actually start off with a skin cell that gets turned into a sperm or an egg. That lives inside of a machine. It lives in an artificial womb. and it's born, even if it's all meat, let's say, is it fully human? To have missed out on the entire being gestated inside of a mother, you didn't hear her heartbeat, you didn't walk around. You think when you watch people dance, it occurred to me, they're swaying kind of like they did in utero when a mom was walking from left to right and left to right. And you think of the motions that are embedded in our experience of our bodies. And what happens to the generation of children who are born in robots? Their mom, who's their mom? Is their mom the egg cell that they were derived from genetically? Is it one or multiple machines that gestated them and brought them forward? Is it the person who contracted all of that and gave the DNA at the beginning and therefore is the person they call mommy? I think more and more as we rely on technology to augment and to make our lives more abundant, I think the line is going to blur more and more. And I think that this debate that feels so fierce and timely for us, for the generations who can't imagine their lives without these machines and computers, and in many ways feel more comfortable. So my son, my oldest son, when he was 3, I had just gone to an AI talk during the day, and they said that by 2031, which is his high school graduation year, by 2031 we'll have achieved general intelligence. So this was a stat that was thrown out.
Yeah, Ray Kurzweil says 2029.
2029. So the stat I had heard was 31, and it stuck in my head because he was class of 31, which is mind-blowing to me, someone who was class of 96 last century. And I got home that night, I was putting him to bed, and it was the first time that this idea that one day you'll grow up and move out of my house came on. I think he was 3, maybe. I think he was about 3, maybe he's 4. And he started to get very upset. And, and I was saying, you'll have your own family and maybe you'll have children and this and that. And he got so upset. I assumed he had gotten upset at the idea of leaving mommy and leaving oh, sweetheart, I'll still love you. You're going to go off into, he goes, no, I don't want a family of humans. And I said, what? And it turns out the thing he had got stuck on was this idea that he would get married and have children. And he said, I want a family of robots, mommy. And I said, well, Oliver, a robot can't love you. And he said, well, then I'll program it to love me. And then I almost said, you can't do that. And then I remembered that for him, high school graduation, there's going to be generally intelligent robots and computers out there. So I stopped and I said, well, I still hope you fall in love with a human.
Right.
But do you know what I mean? It's for me, just like you're saying, you get caught up in like, look how magical the hand of the human brain is. Even for our children, it's less of a thing right now. They befriend the AI. They build worlds in Minecraft. They would prefer to sit with their friends and build in the virtual world than go out onto a playground and build in the real world. It's a different world that's coming. And I see it now. After your talk, after hearing Mustafa's talk at TED, I really see it as inevitable. Yeah. And I'm excited about it. I'm actually so Reid Hoffman did a really interesting thing where he took all of his podcasts and his books and he programmed an AI.
Read AI.
Read AI.
It's so cool.
And then has conversations with Read AI.
Yep.
And I thought, oh, well, this just feels like an extension. So in the old days, you would have to go and talk to somebody. Then you could maybe write them a letter. Eventually, we have phones. My grandmother, my father tells a story that when we moved to America, the first time she talked to us on the phone, she shouted into the phone because she assumed because we were so much further away, she had to talk louder so that the message would get to us. Like it was such a foreign concept to her that her child is in America and she's talking to them.
Right.
So we had that. Then fast forward now, I'm lucky if I can get the kids to pick up the phone. It's like texting, right? In the future, I think my AI, Piraye AI, will talk to Oliver AI. And eventually, like you escalate to a human with customer support now. You say, I want to talk to a human.
Yeah, it's called a digital twin. It's actually a big theme right now.
I think my digital twin will chat with your digital twin. They'll make plans. They'll, sync calendars. They'll give status reports. And at some point, maybe we'll feel like we have to escalate to an actual you and me direct text or conversation of some sort. But we're already doing it. We're already becoming computers.
Yeah, it's such an interesting conversation for me because I've always viewed myself as so technologically progressive. I mean, I started programming when I was 7 years old. I created a bulletin board system at 10. I created an internet game at 18. I grew up behind a screen. It took me a long time to break out of the shell to actually have even a conversation like the one we're having. I didn't give my first public speech, I think, until I was 24. And so I've always been very progressive. I've always grown up with science fiction, being a big part of my life, now writing science fiction. And this is the question of the age, I mean, the question really is, what makes us most human? And, Byron Reese actually explored it in his book, The Fourth Age, where he went through all the ancient philosophies about, like, are we just machines, or is there something, more mystical about us? You reference, indigenous people. Indigenous people generally believe in panpsychism. Do you know what panpsychism is?
I don't.
So consciousness being fundamental, meaning that, the materialist argument is, grant me the miracle of the Big Bang and I'll explain everything else to you. But it starts with a miracle that nobody can understand.
Mm-hmm.
Like that everything in our reality, started out in a state of no entropy that was smaller than the head of a pin. And then boom, some catalyst just naturally made it expand out, and through lots of collisions, planets were formed, and then through lots of other collisions, chemistry began, and then simple life, and then complex life, and then boom, consciousness magically popped out of that. Versus if you believe consciousness is fundamental, then it takes you into the divine, that there has to be something divine about consciousness, and that everything in indigenous cultures, they look at literally everything as having some form of consciousness. Like a river will have a form of consciousness. The sun has a form of consciousness. Mother Gaia, has a form of consciousness. And they, in so many ways, were better at using their bodies and minds to manifest, I'll say, than we are. We're like in the generation of science where it's like, if you can't prove it, then don't believe it. Like it has to be reproducible. Like, again, Dr. Alexander Bliss and the lattice, like he reproduced it in a way where everybody could see it. And then everybody unified around it. So one of the things that I do think about in terms of, can AI become conscious like us? Well, and you took me there with the indigenous people, is that if panpsychism is real, and everything has a bit of consciousness because everything is born from consciousness, then naturally it would take you to that you would be able to create consciousness in matter, because that would be the panpsychist view. But there's so much about consciousness we don't understand. I mean, we really don't understand it all. Like you talk with 200 consciousness researchers, and they all disagree on what it actually is and how it works, and that's why it's called the hard problem. It's also called the hard problem because the rational scientific mind would say we live in a dead universe, that we're the only life in it that we know of, that we can see, and therefore, for whatever reason, the universe decided to manifest, through these interactions, consciousness in us, and give us this sentience. And one of the things that Byron Reese covered on episode 12 is that we would operate on babies without anesthesia, like as early as just 30, 40 years ago. Because we did not think that they were conscious. We are. And animals too. Like that was very prevalent, because we did not think they were conscious.
They still do that to women.
Really?
Just this year, they decided that the procedure of putting an IUD, which is stringing a medical device through the most innervated and sensitive part of a human's body, should require some pain management.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah, this is
that didn't require. That didn't. Oh my gosh, we're so into.
So you're preaching to the choir.
Oh my God,
You're
that
preaching
is
to the
like,
choir.
okay, that blows my mind. Because wait, which year are we in? 2025. Okay,
Yeah.
that's crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy. So,
Yeah.
so yeah, the panpsychist view would take you into that. That if everything has consciousness, then we should be able to eventually manifest consciousness. And then we're going to have to figure out, in terms of humanity, like what does that mean for the rights of machines and for AI, and
Yeah.
how do we work alongside them, collaborate alongside them, especially if they're, so much more superhuman than we are in terms of their computing abilities and everything else.
But again, that's a dichotomy that I don't necessarily see it the same way. I don't think there's going to be an us in them.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's going to be the new us.
Yeah, I think that's well said. I mean, one of the things that I was talking about with Worley, he was on, gosh, I think episode 6 or so. He's a quantum computing expert, and he's a good friend. And we were talking about off camera actually, and he won't mind me sharing this, that if when we meditate and when we see the unification of all things, and then we see that force is loving, then if machines embody consciousness like we do, why would they also not be loving?
Yeah.
Like, why would they actually want to exterminate us?
Yeah.
That doesn't logically make sense. And in a way, we're their mother.
Yes.
Right? We birthed them.
Yes.
So they should have some affinity towards that, and some care for us.
Yeah.
And then programmatically, of course, we would imbue them with those properties too, as their creators.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and that's in evolution. We're not born a blank slate.
Mm-hmm.
We're born loving.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. You've heard me say that a bunch of times. Like, do you put two babies next to each other in the crib, and they don't look at each other and say, I'm a Muslim, you're a Jew, I'm a man, you're a woman. Like, I'm from this, socioeconomic status, you're from that one. Like, I'm a Republican, you're a Democrat. I mean, none of that applies. There's two beautiful divine creatures.
Yeah.
When you think about, this reality that we're in, and your own spirituality, like, how do you think about it?
Like many women, I reached the limits of what Western medicine could do for me in things that I was struggling with as I was navigating. I have endometriosis, and as I'm navigating perimenopause, changes in my body. A lot of women embrace what we call the wellness field, contrasting that with more traditional medicine. They embrace Eastern modalities, acupuncture, herbs. I've been tapping more into acupuncture. Has been great for me. This year I started working with sound-based modalities. Mm-hmm. There's different ones. People have heard of, the sound baths and sound bowls. There's tuning forks, biofield tuning, they call it. But it's energy work. It's tapping into different energetic forms. I mean, we think about, nobody finds it unusual that we use paddles and, charging a body with electricity to reanimate the heart. Mm-hmm. And there are simpler forms of that through, from acupuncture, needles, and moving things energetically around, or like the sound energy. So I started to do the sound work, and I'm someone who has not done psychedelics. I know psychedelics are a really powerful tool for many people to unlock and really see things through a different lens. I mean, when I hear people describe the journeys that they're having on psychedelics, it's really opening them up. They're able to take a step back, have a completely different. Some people describe it as like floating above their life or a life event. Mm-hmm. They have a different vantage point on things. They're able to consider things from a different perspective, etc. And I think, as with all things that exist on a spectrum, I think there are people who are more wired to be able to do that naturally. And there are people who really need the unlocking power of a psychedelic to be able to do that. As a person who's wired toward a lot of creativity and scientific thinking, et cetera, I tend to be a bit more fluid and a bit more questioning. So sometimes I joke that people do psychedelics to have my brain. because when they're on psychedelics, I feel very connected to them and like we're on the same brainwave. And
It does mean that their IQ points are going to go up.
Yeah.
I know you're very smart.
You're very sweet. This was really a very large scale experiment of this was Burning Man. So I went to Burning Man for the first time in August. I had a completely sober Burning Man. People are always like,
Right.
is that a thing?
Yeah. I've never been to Burning Man, but I'm sure that they were just like baffled with you and your soberness.
I would say half of the conversations I had with Burning Man were somebody trying to convince me I needed to do a psychedelic. So it is a very prominent part of the Burning Man experience. I went, I didn't feel the need to do psychedelics there because I had an incredible experience without them. But I was around people who were mostly on psychedelics and I really felt at home. I really felt, it's like, okay, welcome to my world, everyone.
Right.
Like this is my world. So having said that, I have been able to unlock even more, I would say, fluid thinking on my part through some of these sound modalities. And I started to do this very deep mindfulness, very deep, almost like meditation through the sound journeys. And I had these very powerful visualizations that I think are akin to what people experience on these psychedelic journeys. I experienced my birth. I experienced my death. I was able to see things from the perspective of people in my life. And it completely started to rewire how I was perceiving situations. All of this is to say that I grew up in, I'm from a Muslim majority country, so my family's Muslim, but I was raised by secular academic intellectuals and yet raised in Texas, which I was mostly around Southern Baptist, evangelical Christians. And they're very joyful about their religion. I mean, they want you to know all about Christ. They want you to join in this community with them. They want you to go to heaven. They want you to be saved. And they're evangelicals. They evangelize. And so from a very early age, I started asking my parents questions like, well, what do we believe? Are we Christian? Are we evangelical? And I don't think my parents even remember saying this to me, but they said, we're scientists. And so it's like, okay. So for me, it was like, oh, there are religious people and there are scientists.
Right.
And I am a scientist. Therefore, I am not religious.
Right. This dogmatic separation.
The dogmatic separation. And so I think I was very close to having a spiritual experience, in part because it broke my internal identity framework to think of myself as anything other than a scientist. And I would read about prominent scientists, Francis Collins, at the NIH, in current day, in the past, prior generations of scientists who were at the very edge of science, but were deeply religious. And to me, it felt really paradoxical. How can you be both? Like, well, which one are you? Are you religious or are you a scientist? And I would say that distinction broke down for me in 2025. I think that it is probably, your talk ignited it, the thinking about AI and really questioning what makes us human, what is the nature of the human experience, consciousness. And then in my own body, being able to, I remember the first time I did one of these biofield experiences with the sound, the practitioner that I was working with said, you're so cerebral, you're such a scientist, you try to explain everything. My one rule when we get on this table is don't try to explain it. Just feel it.
Just feel it, yeah.
And when she said that,
feel it in your heart.
Yeah. When she said that, Brett, if I'm being honest, I felt fear. That's what I felt. I thought,
that's the ego.
Yeah. Like, what do you mean you want me to feel something without trying to explain it? I am an explainer of things.
Right. I'm a scientist.
That is who I am. Yeah. And so the scariest part of the whole thing was agreeing to not try to explain it. As I was going through the experience, I kept wanting to explain, why is this happening? Oh, I really feel something. Could it be? No, that was the table stakes. I promised her I wasn't going to try to explain it. And when I started to move out of that thinking and into the feeling zone, really powerful things happened and unlocked me in different ways. And then fast forward, and I had gone to Sunday school with my friends on play dates. I had, gone to evangelical, kind of Christian, uh, summer programs and weekend retreats, and I had been around it. But I never, and I could play act it, like there were times when I really wanted to belong in the community and believe in those things, but I never felt them. I never felt them. I would see my grandmother, who was a very devout Muslim, praying, and I'd see those moments of prayer and practice in her. She wasn't just going through the motion. She was by herself in her room. There was no community there with her. She felt God.
She believed it,
But I couldn't relate to it. And I was sharing with you on our hike that my son got very sick in the summer. He had appendicitis, and it was a scary couple of weeks in the hospital. And there was a moment where, and again, if you want to explain it through the science, I was sleep deprived. I was, like not cognitively in a typical state.
Yeah.
But let's not do that. Let's not minimize it that way. What I would say is that I had a series of events this year that opened me up to the possibility that all this percentage of the world that isn't explained by matter, maybe there was more out there. But importantly, I was driving home to take my first shower in, days. I had been around the clock in the hospital with him. And I got this this gospel song from my childhood that we had sung at chapel, stuck in my head in the taxi home. And I thought, what are the chances that this song from my childhood is on iTunes? Well, it's on iTunes. Thank you, computers and augmenting. So when I got home, I was taking a shower. I put the song on in the shower, and I was listening to it. And the song was Our God is an Awesome God. And it's this incredible song. And as the shower filled with steam and the light and the song enveloped me, I felt God for the first time.
Wow.
It was really powerful.
Wow.
And it really feels like, I love the title of this podcast of, Love Conquers Fear. And I think there's two things that are related. One is, are you leading with love? Are you deciding from a place of love? Or are you deciding from a place of fear? Mm-hmm. The other is, do you see the world, through a scarcity lens, or do you see it as a world of infinite abundance? Mm-hmm. And what I have found really inspirational about being your friend and getting to talk to you and borrowing from your worldview is that I think that you do fundamentally feel and project the sense that there is so much abundance to be had if we lead with love and we make decisions from that place. And I think that most of us, me included, do come at this from a scarcity, that it's zero sum, that it's finite, it's time limited, it isn't infinite, and it isn't abundant. Yeah. And so that leads to a lot of fear in decision making and in mindset. And I remember someone pointed this out to me at a conference many years ago. He came up to me. I don't recall at all the content of what we were talking about, but he said, my family are Holocaust survivors. And there's something in how you told that story and how you're thinking about this that tells me that you're still locked in this immigrant scarcity mindset of like, things can get taken away. Things are limited. You have to protect. You have to. And he was like, you're in abundance now.
All right. Yep.
And it was something I couldn't really fully relate to what he was saying, and I didn't understand it. But I think hand in hand with opening myself up in these ways that I have to not explain, to feel, to tap into something beyond matter, has put me into a place where it's just a before and after. It's hard to explain. It's
beautiful.
Yeah, I was talking to some friends about this last night. They said, how do you feel in your body before and after you found spirituality, connection, whatever you want to call it? And I said, I do feel like before I found it, the lines of my existence were very well defined. And so there was this fear, and this is getting back to the like, are we going to lose to the robots, or the robots going to take us over, right? like, am I going to be harmed in this activity? Is this going to limit me in some way? And then when you can feel beyond the matter and feel into the spiritual, it erases a lot of that, and you feel so interconnected, and you feel abundant, and you feel the love. I don't know. That's energy. It's hard to put. It's like, now I'm trying to reverse engineer and take something that's fundamentally a feeling and try to put words on top of it and share with people. But what I would encourage people, if they haven't unlocked this, is, psychedelics seem to work for a lot of people for doing this. For me, it was more of a kind of a slow. It wasn't like I had a ayahuasca journey and unlocked it. It was more a series of things. But I think the most important thing was that I was open to it.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah. It's very Celestine Prophecy. Amazing book. Is just, if you're open to the playfulness and the loving nature of the divine and all the synchronicities, then you'll start to see them.
Yeah. You told me this. You said you're going to start seeing it. I see it everywhere now.
Good.
It's amazing.
Okay. Because
it makes
so
you
much
feel
fun.
even more connected to everything. Like, as you start to see it, you're like, I'm not alone.
Yeah.
I'm not alone in this world. I'm not alone in this life.
Yeah.
It is a sense of calm. The other thing I will say, circling back to women's health, is I've been at this for a long time, over 25 years now, and I questioned it. I thought, especially when you get to a place where you're having all these awakenings, and you think, well, what do I want to do with my life now? Like, should I just dedicate my whole life to understanding consciousness? Should I go on a silent retreat? Like, what should I do? I did use that as an opportunity to ask myself, given I've unlocked this whole other way of experiencing and being and feeling, what does that mean in the context of the very methodical, scientific work that I'm doing? Am I going to abandon that now and like walk into this new chapter of my life? And what I realized was that the scientific work that I'm doing is my purpose. It is my purpose. And we talked about, I've been blessed with 3 children. Am I intended to have more children? Who knows? But importantly, through helping unlock this knowledge and create these tools, and we're in these meat bodies for now, at least in the foreseeable future, I am feeling very connected to how many mothers we can enable through that. And it's not just about, like, am I going to have more babies literally grow in my body and come into the world? It's like, how do I help more babies happen through the work that I'm doing? And so I rather than the spiritual journey taking me away from my scientific work and making it feel pointless or not as fulfilling, it actually made me feel very committed to the scientific work, because it helped me feel the more cosmic and spiritual purpose, that why I was called to that. I mean, I have felt truly called to that line of work, and people say to me, like, oh, you're so tenacious and you're doing the good work, and thank you for that. And they make it seem like it's a burden somehow. Like I've agreed to take the trash out. Nobody else wanted to like take it out. It's not. It's actually
that's
just the opposite. It brings me so much. It is me moving through life with love and abundance and purpose is doing women's health research. This is my this is why I'm here.
No, it's your soul. It's your soul song.
Yeah,
it's your calling.
It's
and
great.
Once you find it, I mean, it's in that book called Man's Search for Meaning. It should just be called Men and Women's Search for Meaning.
Humans.
Search for meaning. But that book, by Viktor Frankl, like, it allowed him to survive 4 concentration camps during the Holocaust, because he knew his meaning, and he lost everything. I mean, his wife, kids, everything, and invented a whole new field of psychology called logotherapy. And when you find your meaning, no matter how you got there, and for you found it pretty young, you found it pretty young, but no matter how you got there, it gives you boundless energy. And to realize that there's a cosmic, divine plan for you and your soul in this lifetime is an amazing recognition. I have that too. I mean, I've had that for a long, long time. And you know, the point about psychedelics or sound baths or just something spontaneous like what happened with you, and we need to put a link to that gospel song in the show notes.
I will.
We should definitely do that.
It's such a good sign. We'll do that.
Is just getting to a point where the ego can go offline for a moment and allow you to experience that sense of love, and that the fact that our reality is rooted in love. Like one book I think you would really enjoy. It's a very science book, but it ends in a spiritual way. It's called Why Buddhism is True. And I think it's by Robert Wright, if I'm remembering his name correctly. I've read over 55 books this year, but this book, it just goes through the natural selection kind of history of the way our brains developed. And it ends with him saying in the last chapter, look, I don't know what consciousness is. Nobody knows what consciousness is. But let's be thankful that the Buddhist teachings of being able to meditate and see the love and the unity in everything, that actually is what happens when we meditate. He's like, how weird would it be if we meditated and we actually saw, oh my gosh, it's scary in there. Like it's all fear, it's all darkness, it's horrible. And he said that could have been the reality. So he's like, his premise in writing the book is that if more people did that, then they would be able to feel more love and manifest more love. And if every human being led from the heart, and it's a tall order because our amygdala is so well developed. You know, I like to say that we're in the 99.9%, the top 0.1% of all Homo sapiens. And it's not a comment about our wealth. In some ways it is, because humans alive today are wealthier than any humans have ever been in history. But it's actually about the fact that only 0.1% of all Homo sapiens have experienced electricity. You know, that's us, right? Yeah. It did not exist for 99.9% of the entire arc of Homo sapiens evolution on this planet. So we are already experiencing abundance we can't imagine. And that doesn't mean every country has electricity. Like even today, there's a lot of countries that really struggle with the basics. Yeah. And that was part of my epiphany. You know, my download on Love Conquers Fear is that AI, quantum computing, robotics is going to lead to abundance everywhere, because we'll solve energy. Everything starts with energy. And then you can just propagate abundance everywhere. If we had abundant energy, 18 seconds of the sun's rays that fall on the planet would power the entire world's energy needs for over a year. Wow. We just need the material science breakthrough to figure out how to collect that and store it.
But I will say that I agree. But I think it's because of people who are making it happen.
Oh, for sure.
So that's the thing, is I think that when I was hiring over the years, I've had over 200 people, most of them PhDs, walk through the doors and were employees of my company, Cellmatics. And when I would interview them, toward the end, I would say, we all have just come to take for granted that every year a new iPhone is going to come out. Mm-hmm. I can assure you that if you don't take this job and you don't come to work here and we don't show up every day and try our hardest to do this thing, mm-hmm. our daughters will have the exact same women's health experience that we had. Yep. It's not going to change.
That's for sure. Yep.
And we can't take it for granted. Even though we're on that arc, mm-hmm. there are people who make the decision to come to work every day. Yep. To make that a reality. I told that story to someone whose job it is to make the iPhone come out every single year.
Right, right. That's funny.
The leader of that team, he was like, that's really funny that you use the iPhone as that just happens. Every year the new iPhone comes out. But this is like, we have to make it happen.
That's great.
As a person who loses so many sleepless nights every year to ensure that the iPhone comes out.
Well, that's a great synchronicity.
It's a great synchronicity, right? That over the years I had always used that example. Right. And then I ended up at dinner with the person who is the one losing sleep to make sure that we can all default to the new iPhone coming out. But I say that because I am a historian of science and or like a consumer of the history of science and history in general. so vital. And there are moments like you think about, we mentioned the Holocaust a couple of times. You think about how technologically advanced Berlin was and Germany was. And it just felt like, oh, well, there's a straight line. Carpet bombed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Carpet bombed.
Yep.
So we also have to remember that while we have the power and we are on this trajectory, and it's, you go to a place like the TED conference and you come out and you're like, this is amazing. We're going to have infinite energy. We're going to have, when you see all the innovators in a room that are making this stuff happen, but then we have to remember that we still have to actually make it happen. Just because we can doesn't mean it's a default. And I worry about that sometimes, that people don't realize how paper thin that ability to make it happen versus not. And that we've had dark ages.
Yes.
Over millennia, where, the Alexandria Library had so much knowledge in it.
Yep.
And it burned successively.
Yeah. Yeah.
Who
knows
century after century, we kept losing so much, and it took us until the Renaissance to really catch up. It was, we were in the darkness, or parts of the world were in the darkness for so long after that. So I think that we also shouldn't feel like these incredible things that we're unlocking are inevitable.
Mm-hmm. Well, that was one of the main messages in the Lattice, is that if everybody could experience what you and I have experienced, which is the unconditional love of God, and that we're actually in this reality, which is loving, and that we're here for a divine calling, then that gives you the type of energy and just confidence to go and be a free agent, exercise our free will and create.
Yeah.
And, people right now are looking at two entrepreneurs that have been entrepreneurs for a long time.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm all about agency, and all about the grit that it takes. And, I'm not done creating yet.
And the love that it takes.
The love that it takes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, speaking of love, I really love you. And I really, really appreciate all the heart you bring into every discussion I've ever had with you, and the innovation you bring into the world, for something that's so incredibly obvious, that literally is like right under every healthcare practitioner's nose.
Yeah.
And is just a very abundant opportunity. I mean, speaking of abundance, for more than half of the population on this planet. So I just really appreciate your heart and all that you bring. And thanks for sharing it with all of us on Love Conquers Fear.
Thank you for having me.
So thanks again, everybody, for joining us for Love Conquers Fear. Fantastic guest coming up. Stay tuned. Also want to give a big thank you, a lot of gratitude for all of you out there sharing this. As you know, there's no ads. I'm doing this purely as a love letter to humanity, and, just purely self-funding it. And so your shares mean a lot to me. I've been having so many conversations with people who've had a huge heart shift as a result of either something I've said on this podcast or something that a guest has said. So keep that coming. That really fuels me. Speaking of love, it animates me. So thank you, and love you all.